you know, like, oh, this is definitely not Nicolas Cage, or like they didn't even cut the guy's hair or anything, you know. Or like Travolta, it's hilarious. Definitely that '90s like action, like where the stunt doubles look nothing like the guys who are the actual actors, but definitely entertaining in that sense though. I just remember watching this as a kid, younger, obviously, and I don't know, it's just one of those movies that I remember watching and being like, wow, this is so crazy. Like they took this guy's face off and put it on another guy. Like for me as a kid, I believed it so much. Like I thought that was something that was so like, you know, that could be done. And then listening to them explain like the procedure, he's like, oh, we have, you know, the top of the line, you know, equipment and the best, you know, plastic surgeons that, you know, the government has and all this stuff. And it's like, man, that sounds so horrible. Like, I don't believe any of this. But man, it was really cool, thinking about it now to kind of see, a lot of the things that Travolta has done in their more recent, you get to see him kind of be a bad guy and kind of that edgy, like going off the rails type of character. But, back then, at least for me, I wasn't so used to that. I was used to seeing him on like Look Who's Talking. I don't know if you remember that movie, like a family movie. And then there's like the one where he was like an angel or something.
Michael.
Like, yeah. I remember watching those movies as a kid and seeing him in those ones, and you know, totally different. It must have been really fun for him to kind of play a bad guy. And I know he was a bad guy in Broken Arrow, but for me, I think this was like the first time seeing him get to kind of loosen up a little bit and play like that badass type of guy, or trying to be like, you know, Cage's character, Castor Troy. And it was really cool to see them kind of switch places. And yeah, man, I don't know. It's something that it's one of those movies that I just remember watching as a kid and just enjoying it so much. And then rewatching it now, it's still very much enjoyable, but it's like the little things, like I said, like the stunt doubles that don't look at all like the people, that makes it more enjoyable. And it's kind of like, oh man, this is funny, but it doesn't really take me out of it. It just kind of enhances the enjoyment, if that makes sense. But yeah, what about you? What is, do you remember watching this as a kid or when you were younger?
I honestly, I can't remember ever watching it from start to finish. I had caught things here and there. I don't know if I maybe saw it on TV, or maybe I can remember watching Broken Arrow like that, like my family renting it and watching that, and I remember having the discussion of, that's amazing that John Travolta was like so down to be a villain, and where he's like, yeah, you know, good guys are cool, but they don't make any money. Like the money's in being the bad guy, you know, and for some reason, I don't know if it's like maybe they thought Face Off was going to be too much for me, because it is pretty fucking bonkers all over the place and you know, pretty gnarly, but I have seen it a few times in my life, and you know, I always, I guess, didn't take it too seriously because of it being Travolta versus Nick Cage, pretty much. Yeah. You know, and then so actually having like you shouting out this film and kind of creating this assignment for me to dig into it and watch it for real, I thought it was a lot of fun. And it's this movie, somehow it kind of gets better as it moves on. Like it starts off really cheesy, and that first kind of action scene with the plane and everything, and there all the crazy gunfighting that's happening, where you're just like, what are you guys flipping around and doing this stuff? Like you didn't explain this at all. Like, why is this like everybody just knows these moves? I guess. Yeah,
this gung fu or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's John Woo, so it totally makes sense that that's his thing, you know. But it's just hilarious. But then I feel like it picks up from there, and it gets better throughout, where you kind of just roll with the punches. At least that's how I felt, where the charisma and everything, and just that they feel like they're having such a good time, specifically Nick Cage, because even Nick Cage acting like he's Sean Archer's character or Travolta's character is just like Nick Cage, just being even more weird, a weirder version of Cage, if that's even possible.
Yeah.
You know, he's not trying to really use any mannerisms or anything of Travolta, so it's fucking hilarious. I will say that it seems like they spent so much money on that big boat chase, which is it is pretty rad, except for they don't, for some reason, John Woo doesn't give a shit about not showing the stunt doubles.
Yeah.
Where you can clearly see, and without even pausing it or rewinding it or anything, that they're, the characters that are supposed to be there are nothing like.
Yeah, well, especially when the boat flips and they flip off of the boat, it's in slow motion, so you're seeing the stunt doubles move towards the camera in slow motion.
Yeah,
and it's like, those aren't the guys at all.
Yeah, it's just like, you couldn't have framed that differently. Like
in my head I was just like, maybe because like the quality might have been kind of crappy to watch it in like a smaller TV, and it wasn't like HD like we have now. Like maybe you couldn't really tell back then. I don't know.
Oh,
I was just trying to justify like why, because it's in slow motion. Literally, you can see the guys it's not Travolta and Cage, so it's obviously to us we can see that because we were watching it on HD, and I don't know if it's been formatted for 4K or whatever, but it's just like definitely not those guys. But then in my head I'm like, well, maybe back in like their late 90s, TVs were squared and they were kind of not as good quality, so maybe you couldn't make it out that much. It wasn't that visible, but I don't know. But you make a good point about the boat chase.
Yeah, because it's good. It goes on for a long time. It's one of the bigger, more elaborate set pieces throughout the whole film, and it just is kind of overshadowed by, we don't give a shit about these stunt doubles that you can clearly see. Even when they ram each other and they do the shot, like a kind of wide shot of both of them like smacking into each other's boats, you can tell that that's not Nick and Travolta driving them. Of course, they can't do it because of safety, but I think you have a good point where maybe it was just that the resolution back then was fine, and maybe you couldn't tell as much, and then now with these new transfers and everything, I'm sure the transfers we watched are like obviously high def, and so maybe this things come to the surface that you couldn't tell before, that they were able to hide, I guess, better. But it's go ahead.
No, I was going to say I was just going to bring up Nicolas Cage and saying that he does shine in this movie a lot, especially it's a majority of, I feel like the majority is more Cage than Travolta.
Yeah,
I feel like it's like a 60-40 split.
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree.
But yeah, he definitely when he breaks out of prison and he goes back to Sasha's hideout with her brother. What's his name? Dietrich, I think.
Yeah, the incestual.
Yeah, that was so weird. Because I was like, oh, that's her brother, and then like he at the end he gives her a kiss. I'm like, maybe I heard that wrong. Maybe they weren't brother and sister.
Almost almost like a make out, like they made out a little bit.
Yeah, he's like, goodbye, like take the kid and go, and gives her like this huge kiss. I'm like, maybe that's not her brother. Heard that wrong probably. But now that you said that, it it's a little weird. But his death was actually pretty cool. Dietrich's, he was a badass for a second, and then But when I was getting to when Cage first gets to Dietrich's place and he takes the drugs and he's like tripping balls and he looks at himself in the mirror and he's like has his eyes wide open, he's staring at himself, and then Sasha walks in and he like turns his head all slow like, hey, how you doing? He was like so creepy, like, oh, this dude's trucked out of his mind. Definitely Nicolas Cage at his best there at the beginning of what we're used to seeing now.
Yeah, the precursor to Rage Cage.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I liked, the direction they took during the surgeries when they were taking the faces off, is they didn't really show the underneath the face. It was kind of, you would see like a millisecond of the underneath, like where the muscles and everything would be, but that was never really shown. So I thought that was a really cool aspect, because you're kind of like, oh my god, they're gonna show like the bare, like, the skeleton or whatever underneath, and there was you never really get to see that. But I thought that was a really cool choice in not giving us too much and kind of just like leaving it up in our heads.
Yeah, specifically when Castor Troy, Nicolas Cage's character, wakes up and he's like takes his bandages off, because they just they don't give a fuck about him. They leave him faceless.
Yeah,
which is pretty fucked up. But he takes off his bandage, nobody's around, and then he realizes that his face is fucking gone, which is, I can only imagine the mindfuck that would have on somebody not knowing what the hell's going on. And then he calls his cronies, which is one of those, that Sons of Anarchy dude that you said is a dick to you, like super young.
yeah. I was gonna actually bring that up again. I was like, that guy's an asshole. But again, like he could have been having now that I think about it, I'm like, man, he could have been having a bad day and just didn't want to deal with fans. But then again, we are the reason why you are who you are. So don't be an asshole.
True.
But anyways, going away from the film. Yeah, that he was like, I don't remember him being in the movie, because he's not really in it that much. I mean, he's in there a couple minutes at a time.
And he doesn't talk. I don't think he actually
No, not at all. No.
He has no dialogue. But I really love that scene, because it goes almost like full body horror, like Hellraiser, where they force that surgeon that did, the only guy who pretty much knows about the procedure, and the only one who can do it, supposedly, they bring him back. And at this point, Castor Troy, Nicolas Cage's character, has no face. He's like smoking, but like his face is bare, which is like, that cannot be good. And he's like, they bring the surgeon into where they're going to do the procedure. And he's like, I'm just admiring your work. And he's just being crazy, but they keep cutting back and forth not to show what his face looks like exposed. Like, you see it for milliseconds, and then you see it as a reflection in, I think, the doctor's kind of glasses. And it's a really cool shot, because you can clearly see that it's Nicolas Cage in this makeup, but the makeup looks really good. It's just not for very long. And I agree with you. I think that I liked more the thought, like using our imagination more, and it was a cool way to go, like not giving us too much, or not being, maybe they didn't want to go full horror, because it is pretty weird that they like that premise already. But then it gets pretty nuts, because he obviously, as I said, Troy makes this surgeon like switch his face with Sean Travolta's face and make him look like him, and then he burns everybody that knows about the assignment alive, so that there's no evidence.
Yeah, that was crazy. Sean, he burns Sean Archer's like best friend.
Yes.
And I think the other actress, I think she's kind of like the head also in that department or something, but that was pretty gruesome as well. And then that prison was pretty insane.